Republicans just voted unanimously to launch a formal impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden because of his son's legal issues. Republicans voted unanimously. All Democrats voted against it. They claim the White House is stalling their investigations into if the president financially benefited from son Hunter Biden's foreign business dealings. The vote gives Republicans stronger legal standing to issue subpoenas for witnesses and documents. Hunter Biden actually spoke up, defended his father, and even offered to testify at a public hearing instead of behind closed doors.
There's no evidence to support the allegations that my father was financially involved in my business because it did not happen.
The House has now spoken, and I think pretty loudly, pretty clearly.
Republicans do not want an open process where Americans can see their tactics.
Hunter Biden was indicted last week on new federal tax fraud charges. In addition to previously filed gun charges, President Biden slammed the Republican impeachment inquiry as a political stunt. And for more on this and everything political, we want to bring in our dear friend Pat Brady, former head of the Illinois GOP. Pat, is just sour grapes for Democrats impeaching former President Trump twice, or is this a way to gum up a re-election? What do you see here? Because this is odd. I mean, but things are so odd politically. Like, right, if this were the mid-'80s, this would be unprecedented. But now it just seems like probably what's going to happen to every president, right? One party's unhappy, impeach him.
Yeah, I think this is none of the above. It's a base motivator.
Okay.
You're just trying to get your base out in the primary. President Trump's trying to gin his base up in the primary to win the nomination. I suspect if he does win the nomination, this fades to the back, because the reality is, if you look at in the last, 3 impeachments, they've been horrible politics. Bill Clinton was impeached by the Republicans, and he left office with a 58% approval rating. I think the country's kind of sick of the impeachment card. It worked in the 70s with Richard Nixon. It worked in the 1860s with President Johnson, but now it's just seen as not a real mechanism for justified removal of a president. It's more just a political weapon, and that's exactly what they're doing here.
Right. Probably should have worked only once, and that was R.E. Watergate. But yeah, since then.
Well, you know, arguably, I think it should have worked after the January 6th stuff with.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't want to get into that because that's too close to home. But yeah, you know, historically. Yes.
Well, Nixon resigned. After the articles
but he
came out.
used a tactic to get him to resign.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get out of.
Well, here's another thing. Just to add on this, this goes nowhere. This is never.
Right.
They're never even going to vote the articles.
Yes.
It's not going to happen.
Correct. Right. Correct. All right. So, but a tactic nonetheless, and you think to gin up the Republican base. Let's go with another Republican name, although considered in this day and age a moderate, but a very popular moderate, a guy that someone had thought could have had the cred and the CV to even make a presidential bid. Governor Sununu out of New Hampshire, throwing his hat behind Nikki Haley, vouching for her. He's going to support former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley as she battles really for second in Iowa caucuses. New Hampshire, though, is important because he's really popular in New Hampshire, and that's coming up just on the heels of Iowa. Your thoughts on the Sununu throwing his cash behind Miss Haley?
Oh, it's huge, and that comes right after last week, Americans for Prosperity, a conservative organization, getting behind her, which means she now has a comprehensive ground game. But remember, these are sequential. Trump has set expectations in Iowa that he's going to win by 40 or 50. If he only wins by 15, Nikki Haley gets second. Trump has lost effectively, and DeSantis is out. We go to New Hampshire, where independents can vote in the primary. You've got Governor Sununu, the most popular politician in the state, a tremendous campaigner on Nikki Haley's team. And if she somehow wins in New Hampshire, the inevitability of the Trump narrative, which I just don't believe, we go down a month later down to South Carolina, her home state, where she's very popular. So every day I read in the paper or on wherever that it's inevitable that Donald Trump's going to be the nominee. I can give you 15 examples. Ask President Hillary Clinton what she thinks about inevitability. So people need to take a deep breath. Nobody's even voted yet. And Nikki Haley, by far, would be the strongest candidate for Republicans. She'd be a game changer.
Thoughts on Ukraine funding now being held up, not necessarily even in and of itself, but being held up by default because Republicans are tying it to the migrant issue. Good move, bad move. Some say it's good move by Republicans because this will further drive a wedge in on a wedge issue, and obviously, what's more divisive right now than America's thoughts on migration. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, immigration is a huge issue. It polls 1 or 2 in the list of people's concerns in the upcoming election. Do I like it tied to Ukraine because Ukraine is so important to our national security? No, but I understand and respect the politics of it. I mean, if you want to get this is what we're talking about. Politics is about the art of compromise. And for the life of me, what I don't understand is people saying, oh, we can't get it done in 10 days or whatever they need, the number of days they need to or have left to get it done. This issue's been on the table for 40 years.
Right.
We know what the solutions are. We know the legislation's probably in the can. Let's just get it done. And I don't quite get the Democrats play here, because if they do, or the Republicans play here, if they do get border security done, what's the wedge issue? Abortion? Republicans lose on that one.
Interesting. I mean, and also, politics, you're talking about, a part of the art of war here, literally and figuratively tying these two topics together. Last one, very quick one. You've watched Ed Burke closely, the trial, former most powerful alderman, maybe in the history of the city, facing what could end up being a life sentence and club fed if he is found guilty. You think he's going to be found guilty? This, of all the cases that have been brought in the last couple of years, and hats off to the U.S. Attorney's Office, they're the best in the business here in Chicago. This, I think, is the weakest of all the cases. Okay.
Just for the reason, without getting into too much detail, an attempted extortion where he received no money.
Right.
And Solis testified, former Alderman Solis, the guy that wore the wire yesterday, which they thought, the prosecution thought might backfire him. But the reality is Solis got to put in testimony about the post office deal, and it was actually already done before Burke got involved. And that's a little bit of detail, but this one's a lot closer call. It could be a not guilty or a split verdict, or maybe even hung.
Yeah, attempted extortion.
Right.
Very difficult to prove when nobody gets cash in the pocket, if that is indeed the goal. And that, coming from you, Pat Brady, a former assistant U.S. attorney. So thank you for your insight on that. Thank you for the insight on all things that are happening on the GOP side. A former head of the GOP in Illinois, Pat Brady, friend of the stream. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Brad. We'll see you.